Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, and we've got a lot to cover tonight. So we're going to do some trucker protest updates. I've got the full course of pills for you guys, but actually, I wanted to start off with a special story, and it's something that we've touched upon a couple times now on the Maple Pill, but just let me refresh you guys in case you don't remember, maybe you missed those episodes, or maybe just don't care about my opinion. But I've been saying for a while now that I don't believe that teachers' unions have students' interests at heart. In fact, they seem to really almost dislike students, I've argued at times. And, you know, it seems like they're just kind of fed up with those dirty, filthy children at this point in time. And like, don't you dare want your child to be unmasked. But don't take my word for it. Let's listen into exactly what was discussed today on an Ontario health update. So Dr. Kieran Moore believes that masks are likely to remain for kids in schools in Ontario even after they are lifted for broader community. This is an abomination, and this man must be fired, and his public health bureaucracy sidelined immediately. I couldn't agree more with Kelly Brown than with that statement. And honestly, like, it is sickening to even think that this is how they're approaching this, right? And I'd love to hear an argument for why this is the case, other than teachers' unions having too much power and the fear-mongering amongst teachers and their unions at this point in time. But let's listen in to Dr. Moore.
Or do you expect that masks will be in place in schools for the remainder of the school year?
Thank you for that question. So we're reviewing all public health measures and making recommendations to government. I would think my initial feeling is that we keep initially measures in the school setting to ensure that parents have confidence, workers have confidence, and students have confidence to go to school. So I anticipate that the measures that we may remove at a societal level will remain in the school setting a bit longer to maintain that safety protocol. We don't want to lose any days in school. We want to maintain presenteeism in the school setting and ensure all children feel confident and comfortable in the classroom. So my gut's telling me that we'll delay any removal of public health measures in the school setting after we remove them at a population or community level.
Next question.
That's literally so fucking disgusting that I can't put into words exactly how I feel right now, but just know that I am absolutely furious at Ontario as well as Dr. Moore specifically over this. This is truly asinine. This has nothing to do with health. This has nothing to do with safety. This is all about fear porn and just managing expectations from teachers' unions, in my humble opinion. And again, understand that this isn't saying that students can't wear a mask, that teachers can't wear a mask. If parents have concerns over their students, you can send your child to school masked, even if we don't have mask mandates. However, to force an entire generation of children to essentially be sacrificed on the altar of safety at this point in time is beyond the pale of cowardliness, in my opinion. I can't believe that we're run by such a group of cowards in this country. And we should, honestly, all of us should be truly embarrassed by this, because this is completely unacceptable. Thankfully, Jason Kenney seems to be mildly standing up for children. And so, again, I want to give, respect where it's due.
Last night, Alberta's government announced that effective this weekend, we're dropping the mask requirement for kids in school and all kids 12 and under outside of school, because kids must come first. For too long, for 2 years, kids have been paying an unfair share of the burden as we've tried to protect our healthcare system from COVID-19. And that's why, as priority number one in our back to normal plan, we have prioritized lifting basically all public health measures that are affecting children, including mask wearing. Unfortunately, the Alberta Teachers Association, the union for teachers, came out immediately and threatened to sue Alberta's government for this policy because, according to ATA members and leaders, they believe this is creating a, quotes, unsafe workplace for teachers. Imagine that. They think that kids who are not wearing masks are somehow unsafe. It's looking at children not as kids, but as vectors of viral transmission. And this is coming from teachers who are almost entirely triple vaccinated, who will continue to wear masks themselves. Our message to the Alberta Teachers Union is simple. Let's let kids be kids. After 2 long years of this, don't you dare treat kids as though they're unsafe. We need to get life back to normal for kids, starting right now.
If this doesn't infuriate you guys, I feel like you've completely missed the plot about what's going on here in Canada. And again, this is just so unacceptable. And honestly, once we're done dismantling all the COVID mandates, we should take a strong look at teachers' unions at this point in time, because they've got do you want these people essentially raising your children for 6, 7, 8 hours of the day? That literally they see your child as such an inconvenience, such a threat to their health, that they would essentially, it sounds like them masked in perpetuity. It's truly disgusting. And teachers that support this should be ashamed of themselves. And honestly, I think it's time to completely dismantle teachers' unions. But maybe I'm just a little too hot and getting off on the wrong foot on tonight's show. So let's switch gears and start talking about what's going on with some updates in regards to the Trucker Freedom Convoy. So this is from True North. Again, reminder, as always, links in the video description down below to everything I'm going to share with you guys tonight. Because again, I don't want this to be the end of your information gathering journey. I really just want this to be the springboard, and for you guys to go down your own rabbit holes and essentially make your own decisions in regards to coming to your own conclusions. But again, I think True North is doing some of the best coverage in regards to updating us on what's going on with the trucker convoy. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Now, this just kind of broke as I was putting together my show notes, so this isn't actually linked in my video description, but you guys can find Brian Lilly on Twitter. But essentially, breaking, Ford government has gone to court to freeze the funds of the Freedom Convoy. Order was issued by a court order today, and all funds are frozen until further notice. I guess the biggest thing I got to say to this is Bitcoin fixes this. For anyone that's maybe been watching this, supporting the truckers, or maybe you're even on the fence about supporting the truckers, you guys, if this isn't orange pilling you, if this isn't making you think, shit, I need to start moving my assets more and more into Bitcoin and having self-custody over it, again, I think you need a wake-up call at this point in time. The government is showcasing how comfortable they are being tyrants. And understand, in theory, you could completely disagree with the truckers and their protest and shutting down borders and things of that nature. Let's say you're on the extreme opposite end of the spectrum. You know, you're I don't even know, a dyed red Marxist, right? Or you're the most extreme leftist, ultra leftist there is. Understand that these rules that we're seeing implemented against the trucker convoy right now, they'll eventually implement this against other enemies of the state, right? They never just use rules unilaterally against one side of the equation. When the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, they will absolutely come for other groups. And again, this isn't part of being in a free society. And the fact that the government is getting so comfortable implementing these new rules, these new mandates, freezing funds, getting GoFundMe to shut them down. They couldn't get Give, Send, Go to shut down the current fundraising, so instead they get the bank accounts frozen. Again, this is not how a freedom-oriented democracy acts in any stretch of the imagination. Now, switching to CTV News, conservatives call for blockades to end, pushing feds to end COVID-19 mandates. I just wanted to highlight this one point here from Bergen. So I believe this is not what you want to do. You're protesting because you love your country. You want your freedom back. To the protesters here in Ottawa, you came bringing a message. That message has been heard. No, it's not just about, and I'm not speaking for all the protesters or truckers here, but at least from my hot take, this isn't about just having the message heard. This is about having the message heard, received, and acted upon. We literally want our freedoms back. This isn't LARPing. This isn't some joke to us. We actually believe that we're individuals and we deserve sovereignty over ourselves. And we're sick and tired of being backed into a corner, being, called every name possible, and having politicians only have our backs when it's politically expedient for them, only when they think the polls show a justification for individual freedoms. No, screw that. I was born free as far as I'm concerned, and I will die free as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to do everything within my power between those two moments in time to ensure that I get to live and continue to live a free existence here in Canada or any other country that I choose to make my home. And so again, while I appreciate the fact that, some of the CPC are willing to come out at times and support the truckers, again, when it's politically expedient, it's not enough. It's not enough to tell us just to go home and take our toys with us. No, this is serious. Literally for over not quite, but for almost, where are we at now? I forget how this timeline works. For almost 2 full years now, we've essentially been one of the most locked down jurisdictions in North America, right? Toronto's been the most locked down city in North America. This is not acceptable. This is not okay. And we're not going to simply back down because you ask us politely to do it. We've been asking you guys politely to give us our freedoms back for the last 2 years, and it continues to fall on deaf ears. This is from the National Post. Tories bloc agreed to push for a plan to end federal restrictions. I believe the time has come for you to take down the barricades, stop the disruptive action, and come together. So it's just, I'm just going to highlight here. It's interesting to see the CPC and the bloc coming together in agreement over anything, let alone mandates. But again, I like that direction. I hope that we continue to see it improve. Michigan governor calls on Canada to put an end to border protests. So now that we're starting to see, in particular, the Ambassador Bridge as well as the Sarnia border crossing in southwestern Ontario, as we're seeing those start to really disrupt, North American trade, we're starting to see a lot more pressure applied against the convoy. And we'll cover it in a second and a couple other stories, but we're seeing some manufacturing plants shut down. We're seeing, certain American pundits using this as an excuse to buy American and things of that nature, or call into question NAFTA. Again, I'm really just highlighting this for you guys. I don't know what's the perfect solution here, right? What is the perfect solution to actually get the government to listen to us and act upon it? Again, it's not simply enough that you hear our message. Oh, that's nice. We heard you. We're going to humor you for a second. We'll all stand up and make one statement in Parliament. Now you guys need to go home, and we're going to get back to the new normal, which is masks, mandates, demonizing your children if you want your children to be able to, be educated without having to wear a mask. Again, we're sacrificing an entire generation of children up until this point. We can't continue down this path any longer. Now from Global News, Toyota halts production at Ontario plants amid Ambassador Bridge blockade. So Toyota says it's pausing production on all 3 Canadian manufacturing lines Thursday as the ongoing Ambassador Bridge blockades compound existing constraints tied to supply chain, weather, and COVID-19 disruptions. So again, that's a mouthful here. Understand that, and I've been seeing anecdotal stories about this on Twitter already, that when you go into like a car dealership now, or if you're trying to buy a truck, again, I know that this isn't necessarily all Toyota oriented, but when you go there, oftentimes they're out of stock. I've heard of dealerships now that aren't even doing waiting lists because they don't even know when they're going to receive the supplies. So while I've got no doubt that the Ambassador Bridge, being blocked is slowing down trade and will have impacts to Canada's manufacturing, I don't think that that's the only part of the story here. However, I'm almost certain that the government and mainstream media will make it 100% the convoy and freedom protesters' faults, even though we already had a very disrupted supply chain. We covered it in the past in previous stories, but we also had, The Economist coming out with an article called The Shortage Economy. This is the new normal they want you to be essentially existing within. Blockades in solidarity with the so-called Freedom Convoy at the bridge connecting Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan are stretching into their 4th day, stymieing what's typically the busiest land border crossing in North America and causing delays at other ports of entry. Then from the RCMP, this is from CTV News. RCMP say main U.S. border crossing in Manitoba closed by convoy protest. So this is the Emerson crossing. So again, we're continuing to see more and more protests, or more sympathy protests, depending on how you kind of want to frame it. Then we've got this from Post Millennial. Ottawa police issuing warning truckers immediately end protest or face arrest. We are providing you notice that anyone blocking streets or assisting others in the blocking of streets may be committing a criminal offense. You must immediately cease further unlawful activity or you may face charges. And again, I'll leave you guys to go down your own rabbit hole here, but it sounds like there's going to be as many or more protesters out this weekend in Ottawa and other cities than there has been previously. Again, it's all kind of anecdotal. It's hard to really separate noise from signal at this point in time, but I just want to encourage those of you that are inclined to go protest. Again, as I've encouraged you throughout, if you're so inclined, I think you should do so. Make your voices heard, because I do believe we're starting to see some results from this, right? I don't think that we have Aaron O'Toole resigning, or like being pushed out of the CPC leadership, I should say. I don't think that we'd have different CPC members of parliament standing up and speaking out. We certainly wouldn't have had two members from the Liberal Federal Party from Quebec coming out and speaking about their concerns over the divisive language of our Prime Minister. I don't think that we'd have Justin Trudeau being heckled to the extent he, not necessarily heckled, but sort of heckled to the extent he is in Parliament. And essentially now for 2 days straight, I showed you guys the clip yesterday, but for 2 days straight now, he's walked out of questioning period. He literally believes that he's above having to answer questions to other MPs. So if that's what he thinks about fellow MPs, imagine what he thinks about you or me, us dirty, fringe minority plebs. I don't think he thinks very highly of us. And then I want to highlight this. Former Canadian military and police call on veterans and retired police to come to Ottawa and support the truckers.
My name is Eddie Cornell. I'm a veteran of the Canadian Forces. I served in a combat arms trade, and I'm calling on all fellow veterans to stand up for your country once again. You're not wearing your uniform at this point, but you're a soldier, no less the same that you were prior to retiring. We are in a very critical situation in this country where our freedoms have been taken away. All of you know what it's like to stand up for freedom and democracy around the world. We've done it, and it's your turn to do it here in our own country. They're starting to take it away. You can see it. You can smell it. I need you to come here and support this action. You have to be part of something bigger than yourself. Don't be afraid to put yourself in harm's way like you did before. Putting yourself in harm's way got you where you are now, and you need to do it once again. I'm calling Stand 2 for all my brothers and sisters that served to come to Ottawa. If you can't come to Ottawa, stand up in your community. Let your voice be heard. And I mean in a non-violent way. Violence is something that is not what we're trying to have anything do to incite insurrection or anything of that nature. I'm asking you in a peaceful manner to come forward and stand up for your country and hold the line.
100% agree with that sentiment. Then this is from the National Telegraph. This is kind of a new source for me, so I'm not positive how reliable they are. But breaking Ottawa, so again, I haven't confirmed this from any additional sources, but breaking Ottawa Police Staff Sergeant resigns from position today. So the National Telegraph has just gotten word from an inside source inside the Ottawa Police that one of their staff sergeants has resigned from his position today, likely over a disagreement with the city's policing philosophy towards the Freedom Convoy. This is a major development for the Ottawa Police, as senior NCOs are the core of any police force, and enforcing anything without their leadership is extremely difficult. The source also said that there are unusually high rates of uniformed officers taking stress leave, vacation days, and sick days. This is another indicator that the people inside the police force are not happy with the directions they are receiving from their political leaders. The situation is still developing. Stay tuned for updates. So again, it will be very interesting to see if this is confirmed and how the mainstream media approaches this, or if they decide just to kind of ignore it. Then wanted to highlight from CTV News, Canada's Freedom Convoy attracts support from U.S. and around the world. And it has been fascinating to see all the different protests sparking up, right? We've seen protests now in Australia and New Zealand related to truckers and freedom convoys. We've seen it occurring in Europe. We've seen it in the United States. I also believe it's happened in Brazil. So we're now starting to see it on 4 of the 6 continents here. Again, for all I know, it could be occurring in Africa or Asia as well. But definitely, I've heard of different protests or similar freedom convoys in those 4 continents. Now, this is from the National Post. So Randall Denley, fixing supply is one part of... Oh, I didn't realize it. We've actually slipped into my blue pill story of the day here. So Randall Denley, fixing supply is one part of solving Ontario's housing crunch. Immigration is another. The biggest impediment, though, is public acceptance of not just greater intensification, but of suburban expansion. And so while I agree with this overall, that's an aspect of it, again, until we fix the monetary policy here in Canada, this is all just Band-Aid solutions, right? Until the government stops just printing money crazily, until, printing press stops going burr, we're not going to be able to really rein this in, right? Unless we implement the most draconian rules around real estate. And again, that's only going to be a temporary measure, because workarounds and other solutions will come up as any economy that's even mildly free is likely to develop. So from the National Post here, there's no doubt that both the government and the task force are on the right track when they when they say Ontario needs more housing. According to a report by Scotiabank in January, Ontario needs an additional 650,000 dwelling units to bring the province up to the national average. Canada itself lags the average in G7 countries. If Ontario were to meet the G7 average, it would require 1.2 million units. That's today, not 10 years from now. So interesting read. Really encourage you guys to go check it out. I know I've got a lot of real estate investors that follow my content as well from my previous days on the Canadian Real Estate channel. So yeah, we definitely seem like we're not going to end up with a surplus of supply for the foreseeable future without some extreme macroeconomic reversals or some extreme changes in monetary policy. Now from the Toronto Star, why rush it? Alberta Doctors says decision to lift COVID-19 measures premature. And I just want to go on a little rant here about these reversing measures being premature. Absolutely not. The burden of proof, like literally, as far as I'm concerned at this point in time, the burden of proof should be every single day the government has to re-justify the measures that they've implemented up until this point in time. And if they can't re-justify every single day, we should absolve and get rid of or abolish every single mandate and restriction that's currently in place. And I don't think they can. I think that there's a strong enough argument to be made that we should be open and free. Again, I don't think the burden of proof should be on opening up. The burden of proof, and it needs to be a wild amount of burden of proof, in my opinion, needs to be upon them keeping us locked down. And again, it's just interesting to see how the narrative's constantly being framed against freedom-oriented individuals. Now, this is from iPolitics. Opposition parties, industry want COVID exit plan from feds. Again, to think that we're 2 years into a emergency, into a pandemic, and we still don't have clear guidelines from our government officials in regards to when we do open up again, just shows you that they've got no real intentions to opening up until we demand our freedoms back. Pressure is mounting on federal government to end its COVID-19 mandates and restrictions, including for travel, which Canada's tourism sector says are now obsolete. Ottawa needs to drop its on-arrival and pre-departure PCR test, the Canadian Travel and Tourism Roundtable said Thursday. Canada's travel rules were designed to keep COVID out of the country, but less than 1% of infections have been associated with international travel, said Dominic Mertz, Division Director of Infectious Diseases at McMaster University in Hamilton. Now this is from MSN via the Canadian Press. So Indigenous and Black federal inmates see more use of force, correctional investigator. So just wanted to highlight this here. So Leticia Gutierrez, senior policy advisor in the office, says an investigation from 2015 to 2020 on use of force and race showed these incidents have increased despite an overall decline in prison populations. Correctional investigator Ivan Zinger released his annual report today and is calling on the government to sign an international treaty aimed at preventing torture called the Optional Protocol to the Convention Against Torture. He says ratifying the treaty would create a framework for independent inspection of all places of detention in Canada. So just a couple comments I had on here. I think it's too bad that they didn't share more details on this, because I think that it would make the point hit home even harder in regards to increasing incidents. But secondly, if we don't already have independent inspection of all places of detention in Canada, yeah, let's do that as fast as possible. That seems like a very simple and reasonable thing to do, right? Having independent inspections of all detention centers. Again, it's one of those things where as you peel back and start learning more and more about the government, you're like, God damn it, they're doing all this other random shit, but all this shit that just seems like it'd be common sense, we haven't done yet. So from the National Post, and this is going to get us into our red pill stories of the day. Ottawa sent nearly $12 million in CERB payments to applicants with foreign addresses. Meant only for workers residing in Canada, some 1,600 received checks outside the country. Honestly, at this point in time, I'm kind of surprised it wasn't more. But again, maybe I'm just too red-pilled. Now from CBC, convoy protests could change the way money is monitored, says watchdog agency. And so understand that they're developing a narrative now that more Americans have donated to the Give, Send, Go campaign than Canadians, which again is really hard to tell, because last time I checked, I think estimates are that more than 30% of donors are still anonymous. And I would argue, or under pseudonyms, anonymous or under pseudonyms. I would argue that there's probably a good chance a lot of Canadians don't want their name or place of residence directly associated with contributing to this, when we've seen different political opinion pieces in the mainstream media, as well as politicians speaking out, saying that if you do so, you're essentially helping fund an insurrection, and that there could be consequences to your donating. And this just brings me back again to how Bitcoin fixes this, and you guys need to get orange pilled if you're not already orange pilled. But understand that, again, regardless of how this plays out with the truckers, if this precedent is set, this will be used as a weapon against all future protests, against all future movements. And none of us are going to be the better for it, in my opinion. The use of American crowdfunding sites to financially fuel the anti-vaccine mandate convoy protest in Ottawa could lead to changes in the way financial transactions are monitored, a top official with Canada's money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog told members of Parliament Thursday. Now, I've been putting together a separate special story that we're going to do on money laundering in relation to real estate and what's going on in BC and to a lesser extent across Canada. But understand that almost no one that initially gets charged of money laundering in Canada related to real estate transactions ends up getting convicted. And yet individuals that want to donate to what has been truly a peaceful protest, they want to immediately implement new rules and regulations so they can track that money, right? So that they can demonize any supporters of any sort of protest or movement that the administration or the government or mainstream corporate press, legacy media deems bad. This is as tyrannical as it gets before we just end up in full-blown dictatorship at this point in time. Testifying before members of the House of Commons Committee on Public Safety and National Security, Barry McKeever, Deputy Director of Intelligence for the Financial Transactions and Report Analysis Centre of Canada, FINTRAC, said there are likely lessons to be learned from the protest. It is really a unique event, McKeever told MPs. Will we learn from that event? Yes. Will we continue to have discussions with our international partners? That's certain. The platforms exist on the internet. They are accessible to everyone around the world. FINTRAC and its American counterpart monitor transactions related to groups identified as being involved in what authorities call ideologically motivated violent extremism, IMVEs. McKeever said that, to his knowledge, the Ottawa protest has not been identified as an IMVE-driven event. So again, this is just fascinating to see how this language is exactly laid out, right? To his knowledge, it isn't. Because one, he probably wants to leave himself some wiggle room for if and when the federal government decides to label this an IMVE. And second, he wants to make sure that it leaves kind of a wedge here for people to be like, why hasn't it been that? We're hearing opinion pieces in the mainstream media. We're seeing politicians refer to it as an insurrection. We hear them referring to it as an occupation. We hear them referring to downtown Ottawa as a red zone. So we should implement these rules. A quote here, any funding that would be linked to IMVE would be extreme concern and importance to us, and we would disclose that intelligence to our law enforcement and national security partners, he said. Again, I know I brought this example up a couple other times in the past, but it's worth repeating. Understand that back in 2016, I believe it was, right? I think it was 2016. Maybe it was even earlier, but with the Tea Party movement, actually, it probably was earlier, but with the Tea Party movement, we essentially saw how the IRS went after donors to the Tea Party fundraisers and different PACs associated with it, and what literally was an illegal move by the IRS. Now, switching to black locks. So plan would ban hill traffic. So vehicle traffic should be banned within 2 blocks of Parliament Hill. A former Ottawa police chief said yesterday. Senator Vern White said cabinet should ensure the Freedom Convoy blockade, now in its 14th day, is the last street encampment of its kind. The city and federal government can make these changes quickly, Senator White said, or told the Senate. I ask that both make this a priority. White called the protest an encampment, not an insurrection, as claimed by city authorities, but said traffic should be banned nonetheless. The expectation of demonstrations and protests in the nation's capital is not lost on me, he said. In my former role, we had hundreds of demonstrations and protests, some that parked themselves for days and weeks, some that were mobile through our streets. Again, this feels very White House-esque at this point in time. We're like, let's just put up preemptively giant fences so that the plebs and public could never even come into our capital, right? I mean, why do we even let people into Ottawa in the first place? Now, again, at least he was kind enough to not call it an insurrection. but that really doesn't feel like he's really given us that much benefit of the doubt in that regards. Now from the Globe and Mail, from Rob Ford to the Ottawa protest, the evolution of hoser extremism. And this is just fascinating. So the mainstream media has a chip on its shoulder right now to frame everyone that's pro-freedom as some sort of crazy, hoser extremist. This is my first time really being hearing the term, but a lot of people have referred to it as the international Trumpism, right? And all that. And the idea that, we've got these mass public movements of individuals just being like, hey, I don't know if these elites actually should govern over us, as if they're almost, highborns, versus actually supposed to be employees of us who voted them in and pay their salaries with our taxes. So I'll just read the start here. Rob Ford, this tolerance for a Canadian populism that is uncouth, unruly, and suspicious of facts, governments, and regulations. So first of all, I really take I take offense to the fact that you're grouping in facts, government, and regulations. So one, I absolutely am suspicious of all governments and all regulations. I'm not suspicious of facts that don't come from nebulous experts with air quotes and trademark science, but when it's actually just open and honest discussions and we actually focus on trying to get to the truth rather than talking points, I've got no issues with facts. And in fact, I suspect a lot of individuals that support and promote the freedom convoys going on in Canada probably feel similarly to myself. But again, it's just very interesting. This is from John Doyle, who's a television critic. This is probably where I should say something about him staying in his lane, but we'll just move on. So from Blacklock's reporter here, and we're going to get into our black pill stories of the day now. So our bailout or cuts, say railway. So Via Rail will require ongoing bailouts for years to come due to far-reaching COVID losses, says management. Millions are required to avoid drastic cuts, said the Crown Railway. Without sufficient and timely funding, Via Rail would be obliged to make drastic cuts, which is a significant business and reputational risk, exacerbated, I don't know why I'm struggling with that word right now, by layoffs, significant restructuring costs, including employment, security and severance payments, and startup costs when the services resume. Managers wrote in summary of the 2021 to 2025 corporate plan tabled in Parliament. Cabinet last February 16th budgeted $187.5 million in pandemic relief for the railway, in addition to routine coverage of ongoing deficits. And again, understand that we were already bailing them out all the time. The bailout came despite layoffs affecting 1,000 employees, a third of Via's 3,328 worker payroll. And so, again, it's shocking to me how comfortable we are just throwing money at all these problems rather than really looking at the underlying issue. And right now, I got to be honest, Via Rail, I'm not even allowed on your trains because of my own personal medical decisions. I'm not sure why my tax dollars should go and bail you out. Maybe you should first let all Canadians ride your railway. Then maybe we can actually talk about bailing you out. Now, this is from True North. Poll shows trust in media government at all-time low. So trust in traditional institutions has declined steadily over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, the poll found. The index surveyed over 1,500 Canadians from January 4th to January 14th. According to the survey, government saw a 10% drop in trust over the course of 2021 to 2022. Now, at first, I was like, only a 10% drop? Geez, there must be more stupid Canadians out there than I expected. But it turns out currently only 22% of Canadians saw governments of all levels as trustworthy, down from 32% last year. So actually, like 33% of Canadians who used to find government trustworthy a year ago no longer do so. That makes a lot more sense to me. The fact that, 20%, that almost feels like a fringe minority of individuals trust the government. Now, again, they didn't actually state here in this article what the likelihood of error or adjustments were. So take this with a heaping grain of salt, but just wanted to highlight that for you guys. Now, this is from the Western Standard. So Queen Victoria statue topplers in Manitoba won't be charged. The statue was toppled by people angered at the reports of possibly hundreds of children's graves being found at Indigenous residential school graves. So I think there's a few things that we need to parse out here in order to even have this conversation. But first things first, this is definitely desecrating statues far more than anything the truckers have done to this date. Now, again, I'm not necessarily even going to try and demonize the individuals that did this, but understand that to demonize the truckers and what they did, right, by putting a hat and a flag and a sign on Terry Fox, and for one lady dancing on the war memorial. You know, I don't know. I feel like tipping over a statue and covering it in paint, that's actually probably a little bit worse. And then one thing I do want to highlight, and this isn't directed at those protesters or anyone, this is directed at all Canadians. You know, what was it, for like a week or a month? Everyone started wearing orange. We all patted ourselves on the back about how we were going to be different than our ancestors. And yet, really, what work's been done so far to exhume any of those bodies or get to the bottom of like actually what the hell went on at these residential schools and at these burial sites? So to date, the Western Standard states here at the bottom, there have been no bodies exhumed. So again, like, it just seems like that's kind of disappeared down the memory hole. It seems worthwhile to actually figure out what the fuck went on and try and figure out how we can make sure that never happens again. And yet it seems like really we've moved on to a different news cycle at this point in time, which I think does no one any good. Another story from the Western Standard, Trudeau underestimates the truckers' convoy and its significance. And I just thought that this was worth highlighting here, this article, and I encourage you guys to read it because it really is obvious to me how much Trudeau has underestimated this entire thing, unless, I don't know, maybe he's playing 10D chess and I'm just too stupid to realize it. But Jean Chrétien used to say that the worst thing one can do in politics is to underestimate one's opponents. Chrétien's 3 consecutive parliamentary majorities speak to this wisdom. And certainly, again, I'm not the biggest fanboy of Chrétien, but I'd take him in a heartbeat right now over Mr. Trudeau. Now from Blacklock's reporter, bill legislates green rights. And I just want to highlight this briefly. I really encourage you guys to go read this entire article. But right now, we're not like literally, it's a not insignificant portion of Canadians that decide to make their own medical decisions based upon their own criteria and their own mental framework aren't allowed to travel. They have to show they're not allowed to like go into restaurants, and they're restricted from all sorts of other participation in normal day-to-day life activities. However, our government's really focused on making sure we get green rights. And understand that this is a very broad definition that's very malleable and can be stretched and abused to kind of fit whatever narrative the government wants. And so, again, when you get blackpilled on this shit and you start going down rabbit holes and looking at like the World Economic Forum or Klaus Schwab's Great Reset book, and you start thinking about, ooh, they want to like have carbon taxes on the individual. Ooh, they don't think I should own a car. Ooh, they want to make sure all vehicles are using electricity. Oh, wait, and didn't the U.S. government just recently pass that infrastructure bill where they're going to have a kill switch in all vehicles by 2026? Yeah, none of this has to do with rights. All of this has to do with just government policy and government posturing, in my opinion, to try and show how green they are, because they think that that's a cool buzzword that the majority of the population will be like, yeah, I guess being green's better than not being green. So again, I encourage you guys, but we got a lot of stories today, so I'm going to keep rolling. But let's shit on another railway company here for a second. So MP repeal rail tax holiday. This blew my mind. I had no idea that this was actually the case in Canada, but the Commons yesterday voted unanimously to formally repeal terms of a contract awarding Canadian Pacific Railway exemption from taxation. Lawyers for the corporation have sued to enforce the 19th century contract promising the CPR a perpetual tax holiday. Ridiculous, said Conservative MP Michael Cram, Regina Wascana. He compared the legal case to enforcement of a 1670 royal charter that granted Hudson's Bay Company a monopoly on inland trade in much of what is now Canada. Imagine for a minute if the board of directors of Hudson's Bay Department stores woke up tomorrow and decided they wanted their old monopoly back, Cram told the Commons. Imagine if they went to court and tried to shut down Canadian Tire. Yeah, this is insane. Like, how is this not in the news? And how are we not just deriding Canada Pacific Railway at this point in time? They literally think that they should just never be taxed? Wait, aren't they a for-profit entity? Yeah, that does not fly with me. It literally blows my mind that that's even could be a thing. Now, this is from McLean's. I include in the link down below the 12foot.io links so you guys can get around the paywall. But this is the power list. So 50 Canadians who are forging paths, leading the debate, and shaping how we think and live. And so first things first, I just want to say right now, you guys go check out this list, but I didn't see many names that gave me confidence in Canada if these are the power people that are changing the way we think. And seeing Chrystia Freeland as number 2, that just made me cringe so much. Although I guess it's kind of nice that Trudeau's not, I didn't even see him on the list when I quickly browsed through it. So I guess, you take the good with the bad. But again, if you guys want, link in the video description down below. Another story here from Blacklocks. This is about We Charity and how they're getting all their funding from the U.S. now because essentially the Canadian government took back the $43 million grant we originally gave them. You guys know when I get an opportunity to talk about the We Charity scandal, I'm always going to bring it up because, again, I think, honestly, a lot of politicians and elites think this is just how you do business and this is just a normal course of things. This is not how we should do business in Canada. This should not be in the normal course of things. So again, in case you guys forget, the financial disclosures follow a 2020 cabinet decision to withdraw $43.5 million grant to We Charity. Cancellation of the grant came amid revelations We Charity hired then Finance Minister Bill Munro's daughter out of college, hosted Munro and his family on a $41,366 expense-paid trip to Kenya and Ecuador, and paid $481,751 in talent fees, free trips, and gifts to members of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's family. So again, let's take a step back. The government gave them $43 million, over $43 million. Essentially, over 1% of that went directly back to Justin Trudeau's family. Are you guys cool with that? I'm absolutely not cool with that. Imagine if you frame this different way. Hey, every time a politician passes a new law or gives out money to an entity, they get 1% of it back. Well, do I think that that's going to encourage government officials to hand out more money or less money? Yeah. Records showed in the period from March 11th to August 13th, 2020, We Charity had 38 calls and meetings with MPs, cabinet members, federal employees, and political aides. I mean, they met with everybody. New Democrat MP Charlie Angus from Timmins, James Bay, Ontario, earlier told the Commons Ethics Committee it was right into the Prime Minister's office. This was pretty extensive. So again, I encourage you guys, go down that rabbit hole, and we should never forget the We Charity scandal. Now from the Western Standard, vaccine passports purpose was not prevention or protection. So again, I really encourage you guys to go read this, but it's becoming more and more obvious that for a lot of politicians, for a lot of leaders, for a lot of health officials, that this is all just about power. And so this story in particular focuses on Jason Kenney looking to roll back all the mandates and restrictions in Alberta. And literally then you had Calgary looking to pass individual bylaws, essentially mandating their own health restrictions. And so, one, that's a quagmire that I don't think they fully understand the consequences of, right? So, like, again, this would essentially be like, I just want to highlight this here. I'd like to know if their intention to create an entirely separate municipal public health policy, he said. Yeah. Again, I would much rather our municipal politicians focus on fixing potholes and roads and things of that nature. And I'd really like if just all government officials mainly stayed the fuck out of our personal medical choices and decisions. But again, maybe I'm just a dreamer. Then I want to highlight this. This is from the Ron Paul Institute and talking about the greater good or grander evil. So every time I hear some middling news reporter parrot for the greater good in reference to whatever the next absurd COVID health order is, I'm reminded of that famous scene in Hot Fuzz. A circle of people are discovered in a secret underground lair by the protagonist, torches held beneath their chins and black hoods covering half their faces. They nod at each other, chanting the greater good over and over after confessing to murdering half the village to win the coveted Village of the Year award. Their addiction to perfection and rules created a superficially idyllic but ultimately violent hell. The Black comedy is meant to depict a very real ideological horror story where the pursuit of utopia justifies terror. When civilization gives up on moral principle and decides to try out moral outcomes, it leads the government to view individuals as subservient to the collective. Their rights and safety can be ignored so long as the greater good is being served. Once the individual is no longer sovereign, any group desire can justify the abuse of rights until citizens become nothing more than depersonalized identities. This is the this is the idea that sits at the heart of every collectivist regime, and we have seen it quietly gaining popularity within a range of activist movements. Yeah, it is very concerning. Whenever you hear someone say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, your spidey senses should immediately tingle. Whenever someone says it's for the greater good, you should immediately call them out for being a commie. Maybe not exactly call them out for a commie, but you should really call into questions their underlying motivations and whether they simply view you as an asset of the state or the state as a mechanism to essentially grant you freedoms, liberties, and the pursuit of happiness. Because I know which one I want to be in. And it's not the one where the state owns me. And then I want to highlight this from Martyr Made. If you guys haven't checked out his podcast, I really encourage you to do so. But he had a great thread here just talking about the differences between the left and right when they get into power. So a major difference between conservatives and progressive regimes is in how each behaves in victory. The more secure they feel in power, conservatives loosen their grip. Progressives tighten it and finally feel comfortable rolling out impositions they'd previously kept hidden. The conservative tendency towards loosening up in power is ancient and well known. It's the meme behind good times create weak men, part of the meme. Call it complacency, decadence, but it's an historical reality. Every left-wing regime in history hides its real demands until it achieves enough power to impose them. They reveal precisely as much as they think they can get away with at any given time. And if they slip up and mask off too early, they always resort to force. Yep, and that sort of feels like that's exactly what we're seeing play out here in Canada, if you were to ask me. But enough black pills. Let's get on to a couple clown pill stories of the day. So I shared this on my IG stories earlier, but in case you missed it from the post-millennial, NPR runs an insane article about skin tone of emojis and white privilege. And I want to highlight this quote because, like, I don't know who this person hangs out with, but you need better friends if this is what your friends are thinking about. One friend who is white told me that it was because he felt that white people were overrepresented in the space that he was using the emoji, so he wanted to kind of try and even the playing field. What? But literally, look, this is from NPR. Some white people may choose the yellow thumbs up emoji because it feels neutral, but some academics argue opting out of a white signals a lack of awareness about white privilege akin to society associating whiteness with being raceless. Literally, we're like academics are getting paid in post-secondary institutions to create this garbage. More and more, if I ever have children, I'm going to want them to go to trade school at this point in time. Another clown pill. We talked about this yesterday, but it's worth diving deeper into it because somehow the administration doubled down on their fake facts. So Biden admin fact checkers busted lying about distributing crack pipes to drug users. Reports for the Washington Free Beacon said that absolutely HHS told them crack pipes were part of the package. So again, I don't want to go deep down this, but like when you see Psaki essentially saying like, no, we're not giving out crack pipes, and then literally HHS is like, yeah, we are. That's what part of a safe smoking package would look like, right? It's just clown world. We live and we're led by clowns at this point in time. So I thought this was really interesting as well. So this was 2 tweets from Omar Algebra. And so essentially this one is dated back in 2011. It took 4 weeks of protest for the Tunisian president to resign, but only 2 weeks for Mubarak to resign. Who's next? And this is a quote from 2022. To the occupiers of the Ottawa airport, this kind of behavior is unacceptable. It is time to go home. And there does seem to be just a certain amount of irony there, which at least I found humorous. I don't know about you guys, but let's keep rolling here. We're going to get into some white pill stories for today. This one's from the Toronto Star. I'm as surprised as you guys that we've got a white pill from the Toronto Star. But why Pierre Poilievre has been embraced by Bitcoin believers, including one who's raising funds for the Freedom Convoy. So really encourage you guys, go check out this article. It actually was well put together, in my opinion. It's very extensive, and it talks about some of the different Bitcoin maxis or Bitcoin proponents that are helping orange pill or maybe have orange pilled Pierre Poilievre. As I mentioned in the past, I don't want to hold any politician or any organization or party on a pedestal, but I do think if we're ever going to get an orange pill prime minister, it's probably going to be Pierre or Max. So it's nice to at least see two options rather than one. Although I've never actually extensively looked into Max's and the PPC's opinion on Bitcoin, but they certainly seem to be more from the Austrian economics school as well. Now, this story is from the province. So Kid Carson dropped from Z95.3 radio gig after pro-convoy rant. If you think the trucker convoy in Ottawa is a racist movement, you've been tricked. You've been fooled, he said during Wednesday's morning show. Again, I encourage you guys to go read this article, or actually, I shared it on my Instagram stories, I believe, as well. But essentially, there's an actual video clip of him just kind of discussing his thoughts and opinions. And honestly, to me, it felt like he was really voicing a lot of the concerns I think we all have, right? Where it's like, I've been thinking this for a while, but I've been scared to speak out. You know, something doesn't feel right. You know, I'm continuing to see just more and more erosions of freedom. Yeah, again, it's really worth the listen. And Western Standard also covered it. So again, I encourage you guys to go check it out at the Western Standard if you're so inclined. And then finally, I want to highlight this. This is from Matt Tabibi's Substack, and really interesting. I'm going to butcher this name pronunciation. I butcher most name pronunciations, but this one even more so. But Justin Trudeau's Ceausescu moment. So essentially, this is referring to the Romanian, I forget whether it was a prime minister or president, that essentially he was in such a bubble that when his government fell, it literally blew their minds. And there's a video clip included in this, and this is like a historical video clip where essentially he's giving a public speech and the crowd starts turning against him. And he just starts like yelling at them to shut up. And then his wife starts yelling at them to shut up. He yells at his wife to shut up. And they're literally so oblivious to the state of the average person and their opinion of the regime at that point, the communist regime in Romania at that time, that they had no idea that this was going to happen. Fast forward 4 days later, they're being lined up and shot. So again, this is obviously a bit of an extreme example to compare Justin Trudeau to the former Romanian prime minister. But I think it shows the hubris that politicians are capable of. And this is just a great history lesson if you guys are unfamiliar with it. As well, as I mentioned earlier, Martyr Made, he's got a podcast episode about it. I believe it's called The Anti-Humans, episode 19. It's dark and it's grim and it's terrible, but I think it's also really worth a listen because it's important for us to understand how evil and corrupt governments can become and how easy it can be for them to terrorize and demonize their citizenry when they've simply made them the other. So denouncing truckers for unacceptable views, Canada's Prime Minister skipped town rather than face evidence of his own unpopularity. Is neoliberalism finally cracking? And I just want to highlight one of the paragraphs here, but again, encourage you guys to read all of it. There may be no real-world comparison between a blood-soaked monster like Ceausescu and a bumbling ball scratcher like Joe Biden, or an honorarium gobbling technocrat like Hillary Clinton, or a handsome Dan investment banker like Emmanuel Macron, or an effete pseudo-intellectual like Justin Trudeau. Still, the ongoing inability of these leaders to see the math of populist uprisings absolutely recalls that infamous scene in Bucharest. From Brexit to the election of Donald Trump, to now the descent of thousands of Canadian truckers upon the capital city of Ottawa to confront Trudeau, a consistent theme has been the refusal to admit, not even to us, but to themselves, the numerical truth of what they're dealing with. And again, really great read. Most of his pieces on Substack are, so I encourage you guys to go check out Matt on Substack. And then finally, your meme of the day. I thought this was a good one. I'm telling you, the guy and the dog are working together. Oh, come on, George. You and your conspiracy theories. And it's a bunch of sheep in the sheep pen. And yeah, it's sometimes hard not to feel like that's exactly a real-life depiction of us here in Canada, or a lot of individuals in different, almost at this point in time, I should call them former Western democracies. But anyways, that's your daily dose of the Maple Pill. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. Reminder, I am uploading on both BitChute as well as Rumble these days. So again, if you guys hate the fact that I'm posting and you have to watch live on Facebook or YouTube, you can jump over. I upload those. They're usually up and available within an hour of the live broadcast being done. Eventually, I'll figure out how to live stream on Rumble concurrently with YouTube and Facebook. But right now, until more of you guys jump over to those platforms and I actually start getting views on those platforms, I still need to put out content on big tech because that's where my audience is. But I really appreciate those of you that are engaging with the content, those of you that are adding stories on the Problems or Profits Discord. Again, link in the video description down below if you want to join that Discord. There's a separate channel there for Maple Pill and Maple Pill Stories. So again, I really do appreciate when you guys share and participate in the creation of this show. As well, I'd love to hear from you guys. How can I make this show better, right? How can I get this to be more attractive to the average person? Is the show too long? Is it too short? Do I cover too many stories? Not enough stories? Love to get your feedback on that. But let's quickly jump into the chat because I really do appreciate you guys engaging with this content. So we've got Hungarian Experiment in the house. Appreciate it, Peter. We got Stepfar 53. Snowboarding went well. Hey from Kyle. Aislinn saying hey. Beng saying I can't believe those teachers in Alberta. Absolutely, they should truly be ashamed of themselves, in my opinion. We got Project LB52. That's the NFT project I'm involved with. If you guys are interested, there should be a link in the video description down below. If not, chastise me. I'll make sure I fix it next time. Craig Campbell says, Candice Bergen is quickly becoming a total disgrace. She is so stupid. She asked the turd if 100% of Canadians are jabbed, will he lift the mandates? It's nothing to do with jab. It's about total control. She is useless. Yeah, I understand your position there, Craig. It was wild. That didn't make it into today's show, but she essentially asked, when will you remove the mandates? Is it when 100% of Canadians are jabbed or vaccinated? And what's interesting is there's still no definitive answer. And as I mentioned, again, Justin Trudeau walked out question period for the second day in a row. That to me just shows such hubris when you've got massive protests going nationwide across the country and you still don't feel like you should be held accountable by anyone else. It drives me freaking insane. Abdul says, yo, what's up, everyone? Erica Robbins in the chat. Appreciate it, Erica. Ritesh says, I was like, no one is talking about this. Then I realized Matt would be, and here I am. Awesome. Glad that we're not alone, Ritesh, that we're both thinking similar thoughts. And again, that's a big part of why I created the Maple Pill, right? I want you guys to know you're not alone. You're not crazy, regardless of what the mainstream media, your politicians, the corporate press, all that shit. They're the crazy ones. I'm almost certain they're either crazy or evil at this point in time. I'm not sure if I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and just being naive or stupid, but maybe that's the case. Academics, LOL, says Hungarian Experiment. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about those academics these days, particularly when they tell me it's a sign of white privilege that I just use the default thumbs up button. If nothing, that's just a sign of laziness, in my opinion. But honestly, I would have thought people would react more poorly to a white person using the white emoji. Who would have guessed it? But I don't think you can do right by these people at this point in time. I probably could get canceled for saying these people. The Hungarian Experiment. My grandparents and mom fled and came to Canada because of Ceausescu. I listened literally multiple times before this show, and then immediately once the show, so I could try and get the pronunciation right. Immediately once the show starts, like I just forget everything I ever learned. Can you repeat the name of the podcast? Yeah, Martyr Made is the name of the podcast. Every episode's absolutely amazing. If you guys are fans of like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History or the history of Rome or the history of Byzantium, if you just like history in general, it's absolutely amazing. Really well done, high production value, and it's a deep dive into I'm getting goosebumps, honestly, just thinking about it, how much I love that podcast. But it's a deep dive into subject matters that oftentimes got overlooked, misrepresented, or not covered seriously enough in our old history classes. So he's got an amazing series on the Jonestown is it called the Jonestown Massacre or whatever it was in Jonestown, right? Where all those people committed suicide. But the Anti-Humans episode, I believe it's episode 19, it discussed what went down in Romania. And like, honestly, it's some of the most crazy shit. Like, I could tell you it right now and you wouldn't believe me until you just hear him lay out how evil these people were, particularly to the not like they essentially demonized a subgroup of their population and put them through some of the most horrific torture I could imagine. Literally insane. Uncle Chuckles says, God bless the truckers. Absolutely agree with you, Uncle Chuckles. Basmatic, moving to Alberta, had been planning to for months already. Certainly seems like Saskatchewan and Alberta are the more free provinces. To be honest, I would say that Scott Moe seems to be the most freedom-oriented and honest, like shoot from the hip premier we've got in Canada right now. I still honestly believe he could do better, but certainly when I stack him up against any other premier, I would take Scott Moe, because not only do I think he's trying to do the right thing, but I think he's honestly trying to be honest. And I can't tell you how rare I believe that to truly be in politics. A lot of these MPs that are now speaking out against mandates and lockdowns and things of that nature, I think they're only doing it because they think it's politically expedient, or they want to get on the right side of the next like tidal wave. And that's not what it's supposed to be about, in my opinion. It's not supposed to be about just like reacting to pollsters. You should actually be listening to the citizens that you're supposed to represent. You should actually understand, like, they should know before it gets to the boiling over point, right? If they were actually connected. I've heard from so many of you that have written emails, written letters to your members of parliament and your members of your provincial parliaments as well. And everyone seems to only get back form letters from these individuals. What the hell are they all doing that's so important that they can't respond to us, right? Again, it's important that we all remember and that we remind the government that they work for us, not the other way around. I am not the government's asset. You guys are not the government's asset. And screw any asshole that believes otherwise. But I appreciate you guys. Again, smash the like button. Consider sharing this on social media, because big tech's going to do me no favors in regards to the algorithms. And as always, you can go check me out on Rumble or BitChute if you hate supporting big tech. But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Maple Pill. I'll see if I can scrounge up a few more white pills to get us into this weekend. And again, I encourage those of you that are so inclined, go out and protest if you are inclined to do so. I think it's important you make your voices heard, and I appreciate every one of you that are doing so. We'll see you guys tomorrow on the next Maple Pill. Cheers, guys.